Acquiring skills for accurately attributing numismatic varieties. This video is the second in a series of videos which are intended to assist the coin variety collector to acquire the skills necessary to accurately attribute numismatic varieties. An introduction to numismatic varieties. An introduction to numismatic varieties will discuss die varieties and design varieties. Numismatic variety coins are coins which exhibit physical characteristics that are different from those of normal or perfect coins. Numismatic variety coins are collectible and are sometimes rare, scarce, and valuable. The value of numismatic variety coins will be based on each variety's denomination, scarcity, dramatic appearance, and popularity. Numismatic varieties can be subdivided into the categories of die varieties and design varieties. Technically, numismatic varieties are errors, however they are not in the same category as mint errors. More detailed information about mint errors will be presented in a later separate presentation. Die varieties. Die varieties can result from intended or unintended changes to a die. Imperfections on the die create die varieties, such as doubled dies and repunched mint marks, both being unintended changes to the die. Damage to a die can create a die variety, such as die clashes, which are not intended, and overpolished dies, which is a tooling of the die and it is intended to repair the die. Typical types of die varieties include doubled dies, repunched mint marks, over mint marks, misplaced, horizontal, rotated, or inverted mint marks, omitted mint marks, repunched dates, over dates, misplaced dates, an overpolished die, such as a no FG or a floating roof Lincoln cent, or a three-legged buffalo nickel, and also die clashes. Some types of die varieties is the doubled die. Here we have examples of a double die reverse, another double die reverse on a Lincoln cent, double die obverse in the letters of G of God, G-O-D. Here we have a double die reverse in the letters of 1 in cent. Here's a double die obverse with a doubled earlobe. And here is doubling on the column on a Lincoln Memorial cent. There are 8 different types of or classes of doubling that double dies can fall under. These will be discussed in a later presentation. Here's an example of a double die reverse. Here are examples of repunched, inverted, and misplaced mint marks. Here are 2 over mint marks, both on 1950 Washington quarters. This is the Denver Mint quarter with a D over S. You can see the S under the D. Here's a 1950 San Francisco quarter, which has an S over the D. The S being the primary, the D being the secondary mint mark beneath. Omitted mint marks. It's important to note that in 1980, the U.S. Mint began adding Philadelphia mint marks, or the P, to all denominations except the cent. Here we have 1982 no P Roosevelt dime with a strong strike and with a weak strike variant. Here we have the 1990 No S Proof Lincoln cent. And here are other omitted mint mark coins. Overdates. Here we have a 1942 Philadelphia Mercury dime with the 1942 over 1, very obvious and evident here. The 1943 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel, the 1943 over 2, with evidence of the 2 beneath the 3. It's important to note that all overdates from 1907 and after are doubled dies. Up through 1906, overdates had dates punched into the die, one on top of the other. Overpolished dies. Here's an example of the statue within the memorial on a Lincoln cent that had been polished away, and the statue is not visible or any evidence of it there. This is a famous overpolished die, the three-legged buffalo 1937 Denver nickel. The 1977 Denver Kennedy half dollar has a no F variant. Die clashes. Die clash occurs when the hammer die or the obverse die comes in contact with the anvil die or the reverse die, and the design is transferred from one to the other. Here's evidence of the memorials engraving on the obverse of the penny, and here's evidence of the obverse design being clashed onto the reverse die. Here's a common die clash that can be found, notably known as the Spitting Eagle quarter. This type of clash can be found on several different dates of Washington quarters. Here's the 1983, with the clash being evident as looks like the eagle is spitting. The clash can also be found under the wings and around the leaves and arrow tips. This particular coin actually happens to have a rim cut on the obverse. Design change varieties. Changes in the design of a die create design varieties, such as small date versus large date, reverse design variety. The use of an unintended die creates a design variety, such as a proof die being used instead of a business strike die, or next year's die being used in the current year. Typical types of design change varieties include the small and large dates. Here is the small and large date of the 1960 Lincoln cent. These occurred on the Philadelphia and the Denver mint. The 1970 S large and small dates. The 1974 Lincoln cent had large and small date variants. These occurred on the Philadelphia, the Denver, and the San Francisco business strike coins. Here's the 1982 large and small date variants. These occurred on the Philadelphia and the Denver. The 1974 large and small dates makes a kind of a nice little short set collection to having one specimen of each of the small date, Philadelphia, Denver, San Francisco, and of the large date, Philadelphia, Denver, San Francisco. Reverse design change. This is an example of the wide and close AM on Lincoln Memorial cents. Here is an example of the wide AM, the gap between the bottom of the A and the M, compared to the close AM, which the letters are almost touching, if not touching, actually. Here is the distance between the A and the two T's. On the wide AM, the A is more centered between the two T's. Here we're looking at the close AM, where the A is closer to this T than it is to this one. The distance between the designer's initials and the base of the memorial is shorter here, and it's farther away on the close AM. There's also a change in the font of the letters, mostly notable in the G of each. When looking for wide AMs, you are looking for Philadelphia minted coins from 1998, 1999, and 2000. When looking for a close AM, you're looking for the 1992 Philly, also the 1992 Denver, and the proof coins of 1998S and 1999S. Another reverse design change is on Washington quarters. Here we have a 1962 Philadelphia Washington quarter. The top row is the type A, or call it the normal reverse design. Here we'll notice that the arrows are above the leaf. This leaf does not touch the A in dollar. And the distance between the E and the S in states is close. The type B, which is the more valuable and collectible version, the leaf extends above the tips of the arrows. This leaf touches the A, and the distance between the E and the S in states is larger. You can look for this type B variant on Philadelphia minted coins from 1956 to 1964. In summary, in this presentation we have discussed the meaning of numismatic varieties, the collectability and value of numismatic varieties, the category of die varieties, and shown examples of typical types of die varieties. We discussed the category of design varieties and provided examples of some typical types of design varieties. Detailed information about double dies and repunched mint mark die varieties will be presented in later separate presentations. Continued research and study is highly recommended in order to obtain additional detailed information and understanding. Here are some suggested online references. Here are some suggested printed publications.